Welcome back to Puppeteers. We're your hosts, Adam Krutinger
and Cameron Garrity. And today we have a wonderful Puppeteers LIVE-a-palooza with some wonderful puppeteers who are here with us today. We have David Bizzaro, Christopher Thomas Hayes, and Liz Hara. They are all here to talk about a wonderful new initiative that they're starting up, the Puppeteers of Color Conversations. And guys, just welcome to LIVE-a-palooza. It's so good to have you.
Sweet. Thanks for having us.
Hey.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So yeah, can you tell us about what you guys have started now?
Well, actually, Adam, sorry, if you don't mind. So our guests, or excuse me, our audience will recognize Liz as a past guest of Puppeteers, but David and Chris may be new faces for everybody. If you guys don't mind, actually, just first introducing yourselves. What
They're
some of your guests. I'm sorry.
They're future guests.
They are absolutely future guests. But yeah, if you guys could just introduce yourself a little bit, your background first, and then we'd love to talk about POC conversations.
Hey, I'm Chris Hayes. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. I live now in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a television and theater puppeteer and have been since 2005 in the theater circuit. I've worked with the Mad Cat Puppets in Cincinnati. I've worked with the Center for Puppetry Arts here in Atlanta. I've done some educational theater stuff in schools around the Northeast and all down the East Coast. And I've worked with Sesame Street as a background character and an assist since 2015. 2018, I believe, is when I took over as Hoots the Owl on Sesame Street, and that's what I'm doing now.
Hey everybody, I'm David Bizzaro. I am a actor, director, writer, producer, puppeteer. I also do motion graphics and visual effects. I've been working in production since I was about 15, starting as a camera operator. And then later in life, I worked for the Flaming Lips as a visual generalist, creating music videos, backing videos for live shows, merchandise. And after that, got into advertising. And through advertising, I got into puppetry. I told a client that I could make them a puppet-based commercial, even though I had no experience, and discovered I really, really loved it. And from there, I moved to New York City with my wife and have since worked for the Jim Henson Company as a puppet wrangler and builder, refurbishing puppets for Sesame, as well as building props and working on set as a puppet wrangler, essentially hair and makeup for puppets. So that's me.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I am Liz Hara. I am a puppet builder, wrangler, puppeteer, and writer. I started as a builder working for Henson, did a lot for Sesame, wrangled for Sesame for several seasons. Also do a fair amount of theatrical puppetry. Got to tour with Waka Waka, if you are familiar with their work. And then got into TV writing. So I write for Sesame Street, Helpsters, Don Quixote, which will be on PBS. And right now I am writing for a new Marvel cartoon that will be on the Disney Channel called Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur.
Excellent.
Love Moon Girl.
That's so cool.
That's awesome.
And Don Quixote looks like really cool. I mean, there's not much known about it yet publicly, but the photos and stuff.
Beautiful, yeah.
Taking pictures of Mr. Rogers. So wonderful. So going back to Adam's question that I kind of interrupted there, can you tell us a little bit about Puppeteers of Color Conversations?
Yeah. So Puppeteers of Color Conversations is it's going to be a wonderful opportunity to bring to light some of the experiences that puppeteers of color have had in our industry, and also to, you know, open the eyes and ears of how we can do better by each other. And I think that we'll learn to do that by first hearing the stories and experiences and backgrounds of our community. And so that's what Puppeteers of Color. I can't. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, yeah, that's what it is.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah, that really is, and it's something. David, you and I, as we were kind of preparing for today's conversation, we're talking about is that it is a strange dichotomy of how the world of puppets on screen, and oftentimes, you know, the puppet characters that people may perform are oftentimes, I don't know if we would call it race neutral, or, you know, race isn't really brought up when you're dealing with a red monster or a yellow bird. And then oftentimes also the human cast is so diverse, but for whatever reason, you know, historically the precedent has been that it's a very much a white man's game. Unfortunately, people of color have been able to break through and make below the frame a bit more diverse, but it's really wonderful that you guys are able to highlight this, and for you know, to create new icons that anyone of any race or gender can kind of look up to and aspire to be.
Absolutely. When I first started talking to Chris about this event, one of the things that he brought up to me that, Chris, I'd love for you to add to this. Is he said that, you know, I'm excited about this because I want to ask these puppeteers how their heritage has informed puppetry. Like, what is their cultural background? Yeah. And that is something that we're not hearing a lot in interviews. And I'm so excited to hear from Noel and Pam. And Noel and I have talked, you know, a few times about him working and creating Bear in the Big Blue House. And I want to know, how did his cultural heritage inform how he wrote for Bear, and also how he performed Bear?
Right. Keegan Michael Key. I studied and I've performed professionally improv for about 10 years with a couple of theaters in Atlanta. And when I was studying in the beginning, I remember reading about Keegan Michael Key, who you know from Key and Peele. He would always say that whenever he was in an improv scene, no matter what the scene was about, it was always about the Black experience. Like automatically, when he was entered into a scene, it became, since he was Black, it became about a Black experience. And so I started thinking about the idea, and I'm sure this is not the original idea, that whenever people of color are in those scenes, automatically on top of what the writers are writing, you have this subtext of something culturally going on. And I think that blends over into puppetry, which is really hard for us to think about, because you're right. As soon as we put a puppet on our arm, it becomes, sometimes it's a shield, sometimes it's a hiding place. But I think of it as almost a microphone. It takes what's inside here and it starts to broadcast it throughout whatever it's going to, whether we know it or not. And I think that thing extends to cultural stuff too.
And Cam, going back to your point, like, it is very interesting that, you know, we're dealing with monsters that are outside of the sphere of race. But I feel like when kids watch it, they really kind of project their own race onto those puppets. Like, I've definitely heard of people of color being like, oh yeah, Grover's obviously Black like me. Like, kids have said that, and it's adorable because you're just like, yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think that's what is so wonderful about shows, especially Sesame Street, is that people can read their own experience onto that. But then it would be so incredible to have more diversity below the frame, so that when people are inspired and they think, oh, maybe I can be a puppeteer someday, when they do their internet search, they can see that the person below that looks like them also. And then they can see, oh, this is a space where I could belong someday. And that is what we would like to see more of.
There was a really funny anecdote that I know Kevin Clash shared on a number of occasions, where people would come up to him and say, oh, I didn't know Elmo was Black. And it was kind of this like wonderful, again, that dichotomy of like, well, no, he's red and he's 3 years old and he lives on Sesame Street and stuff. But I wonder, and you know, this is kind of for any of you guys to take on, but I think Chris, especially someone like you, performing Hoots the Owl now, which because of his, you know, the roots of him being connected to Louis Armstrong and other, you know, kind of jazz musicians and stuff, how much having, you know, a character that is kind of, I'm going to use this with broad air quotes, but like supposed to be Black or have an African American, you know, voice to it. Voice is a capital V. is it, do you think there's a disconnect between potentially the people who are writing those characters? Like, is there what's the imperative to make sure that these characters that are going to be race neutral, that all the influences that are coming to them are showing the as wide a spectrum as possible of voices contributing to create that neutral character?
Oh my God, that's a fantastic question.
I to be honest with you, I've been working so hard on it because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't stumbling on anything.
That's
because,
so good.
But yeah, please, would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I remember when I auditioned for Hoots initially, and walking into that audition room and seeing a lot of different puppeteers of color, just like everybody, and automatically I was like, oh, this is amazing to think that this has been something that's coming down from a little up higher about how they want to portray the character. Because yeah, growing up, I watched a ton of Hoots and watched Kevin do stuff with every Marsalis brother that there is. Yeah. Watched him do stuff in the nightclub. I was like a Savion Glover, and so I've always kind of like, I guess, assumed. I was like, yeah, well, it's Kevin, so yeah. But I feel like that character is Jazz and is us, and that Jazz has such that rich history in the African American community, and it's such a strong part. I was like, yeah, that feels like it is. So taking on that character has been mega for me, and even for the kids that I'm around here in Georgia. So the kids that I work with who know what I do, and they're like, right on. Because I don't think even they knew that there were more than one Black person working professionally as a puppeteer. I mean, I don't think most people who aren't deep in the puppet annals of Puppepedia know a lot about who's under the puppet.
Capital M, capital N, Muppet
Muppet nerddom. But it's just really, it's really important for them to see the stuff underneath and to have characters that connect with them. And so I'm happy that Hoots is back and that he'll be doing that hopefully into the next seasons. And I do think about that, not even the Sesame stuff, because I do other stuff too. And when I do other stuff in theater or in other shows that are coming up, I do want to see voices that are like me supporting what I'm doing up here, because I know that I have some freedom with script when I'm puppeteering more in other shows. And it feels really good when you have someone like, what's up, my brother? Look, I have some ideas. This is what we're going to do. I'm like, right on. All right, cool. And it's something that we talked about, and we'll probably talk about on Monday, because I wanted to know, we always talk about the negatives of people's career, but I'm like, I want to know what are the times when you felt you got on set and you read the script or you had an interaction like, my voice is really being heard right now. And it's more than just my physical voice, but like the voice of everything I represent is being heard. I want to know about that. So I know. Yeah, I'm hoping that answers the question, or at least there's so much. I could write a book on that. That's great.
One thing I'm wondering too is like, what do you think the answer is? 'Cause I think we can all agree that shows like Sesame Street and many of these shows do a good job of portraying diversity for people who are just viewers. But again, when you take that look beyond underneath the frame, we could all wish for more of it. What's the answer to that, do you think? Is it a matter of more people creating their own work to open up opportunities, or what do you think about that?
I think it's more work. I think more work needs to be had. Absolutely. From what I've taken in my years of theater and like my shorter years of doing it on camera, is that like, you get really good by doing it. And when you're in front of an audience or the TV cameras are going, you get really good really fast. You get good finding your room, practicing it, but when you're on that camera or in front of an audience, you get really good. And so we need to have more younger generations of color being able to be in those positions where they can be on shows and have quality roles and positions in those shows, to really get them to a place where there can be a diversity. There needs to be more work, essentially. More
Oh
work.
yeah,
So,
I think all puppeteers can relate to there needs to be more work for sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because just as I'm sorry. Go ahead, Liz.
And also when there's more, like when you're the only one, you are the voice of your people. And that is just, first of all, emotionally such a drag, but also when you're portraying a character, when you have to be all things to all people, the character itself gets really broad. But when there's just quantitatively more, then the characters can get more and more specific, which is just better work. Like that's what you want and love from a character. So yeah.
Well, another thing I wonder too is the answer to, like, is it creating more characters like Hoots the Owls that can represent other demographics more clearly, or is it a matter of just casting more people of color and of different ethnicities to more general puppet roles as well?
Yeah, that's
both.
A really great question. Yeah, I think we should definitely be doing that, and also be aware, but mindful of not trying to like just check diversity off a list, like just writing some diverse characters and hiring some diverse puppeteers isn't gonna be the answer. That it's part of how we get there, but it's not the full solution. Like I think that as community leaders and people who work in production, we need to start doing some diversity training, and that's not just reading articles online, that's seeking out, you know, professional resources. You know, I've been fortunate enough to where I live with a brilliant, intelligent woman, and she works at NYU, and she's the big pants job, you know. She's the director of communications at Stern, and she does diversity training, she does sensitivity training, she does inclusivity training, like all the time. And you know, because it's a form of educational learning that's constantly evolving because we're learning new things. And so I get to learn through osmosis. She comes home and she will tell me what she's learned today, or she'll like send me some PDFs that she's gotten from a talk that she went to. And that has really helped me grow in the community, because it's giving me the tools to identify in the moment what might be happening, where, you know, without that training, we might be sitting in a production meeting or sitting on set, and something said that we're kind of like, it kind of feels funny, but I don't know why. And it's hard to communicate that. Like Liz said, like when you are the one person of color on set and you have to speak for your people, it's hard to be navigating that, plus trying to convey to somebody that we might need to take this another direction to be sensitive to the audience we're trying to speak to. So I definitely think that, yes, hire people of color, hire or create diverse characters, but also do the work and learn, do some education.
Definitely. And be that advocate too. It's funny, I was watching the other day, Stephen Colbert had Jon Stewart on, and they were talking understandably of the fact that there are two old white men talking about, you know, race in America. But Jon cited a bit that they did on The Daily Show a number of years back, where there was a panel on the show with Jessica Williams and Jordan Klepper, and Jessica would make a point speaking as the one of her kind, you know, the sole voice for a whole people, and Jordan would say like, no, that can't be real, and then Jon Stewart would parrot that back to Jordan, that basically the exact same thing with some new words, and Jordan would go, yeah, John, you make some really good points. And so it's backing up, you know, your friends and your colleagues, so that they may be the sole voice from a community, but they're not the sole voice speaking on behalf of a community.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
awesome.
and also it's so important to have diversity throughout all the layers or levels of seniority, because my experience, not just as a puppeteer, but as a television writer, definitely is when you are the only POC and at the bottom level, you risk so much anytime you speak up, because are you being troublesome, or is this like a good point? And everybody absolutely wants to be good and do the right thing, so that they'll say, you know, yeah, But if you are the only person who's always speaking up about this, and you're just kind of annoying, you know? But if there are people at the upper levels who can really back you up and are also seeing the problem, then that really protects the people that are coming up and also keeps them in the industry. Like, you can definitely get fatigued and bail out. So this effort really does need to be sustainable and not just bring in a bunch of new young people for these great diversity workshops, but we then need to make sure that it's a lasting change so that these people stay involved and keep moving up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really terrific point there, Liz. For the people who are watching live, that we are watching the comments as they come through. So if anybody has any questions for our guests today, please feel free to submit that.
Been off of that too a little bit, because we were just talking to Jean Marie Kevins in a podcast that's going to come out soon, and she had talked about, because she was part of the team that was like putting together Helpster's team, and one of her goals was to make it as diverse as possible, which is something that I think is much easier to do when you're starting something new. So, you know, again, what do you think would be the best practices to start to implement that into existing companies and existing shows without it being superficial too, you know?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's something I worry about too, is the superficialness of it, and just taking it in diversity for diversity's sake, and then just getting the numbers. And so that's definitely a question to figure out, how to get the quality of diversity without just the quantity. Because a lot of times people take the quantity and they're like, "We did it, baby!" But then you're like, "Oh, well, what are they doing?" Like, "Oh, well, they're assistants and they're kind of in the background. You know, it's all good, but they're here." And then you fast forward 5 years and like, still assistants, they're hanging in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's a definite.
Yeah, especially like the show has established characters, and these are characters, and you know, it was established before they wanted to implement this. Is it right to to fire these people and get new people, or is it a matter of just adding new characters? And I think there are benefits and negatives to both of those, you know. So it's just, I understand how it could be a very complicated issue for people to try to implement and implement in a way that, again, also isn't just superficial, but doesn't kind of make things worse too.
Right.
I mean, I don't think anyone's talking about firing all the white people. And we're not going to clean house, guys. Like, that's not a thing. But what is so wonderful about the puppetry community is that the way anyone comes up is through mentorship. Like, our industry is almost completely like institutional knowledge. You learn by doing, you learn from watching other people. So just make sure that the new people of color that we're bringing in get those same mentorship opportunities. Yeah. Like that, as you are an older person with experience, that the people you are helping, like, just really invest in the youth, which we should all be doing anyway.
And I think, I mean, on the puppetry side, Sesame's doing a pretty good job, and we have a mentorship program right now where we work, we meet during lunch when we're shooting, we work on the little stuff that we need to work on. A bunch of us already have characters, and we're working hand in hand with the folks who grew up and have been doing this for decades, and it's nice to look left and right and to see different faces. It's really good to see, and more of that and on other stuff, because when I move to other things, I go on other sets, it's not always that. Sometimes it's just like, we need a ringer, baby, and those ringers all kind of look the same. So
yeah, and that was something that I wanted to bring up. Not that we across the board there's work to be done, but I didn't want this to just be bashing or singling out Sesame Street and Sesame Workshop, because they for a long time have been doing wonderful things. And Chris, as you just mentioned, there are larger discrepancies out there in the broader production community and stuff. Yeah, that's just wanted to clarify that a little bit. Oh gosh, I had something that I was going to ask. So would love to talk a little bit more about the conversation series that you guys are starting. You have the first one coming up on this Monday, the 29th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Can you tell us a little bit about, specifically who's going to be there and what we can expect?
Noel McNeil and Pam Marciero are going to be on, and we're going to be, we're putting together some questions to talk to them about and hear about, their experiences in the industry, and also talk about, how they, if they did have a really awesome experience as a person of color on set, like how did they navigate? But if there was one that made them feel uneasy, how did they navigate that as well? Because I think as, when we're puppeteers coming up, we don't always have all the tools, in our pocket to know how to navigate that. And so from hearing from folks who have gone through that will be really important to us. And we're also going to have a Q&A. People who've already signed up, we've been sending out an email asking, what do you all want to hear? What do you want us to ask them? Because when we're having these conversations, not just with our panel, but also with our community, we need to hear what the community wants to hear about, like what is on their minds, what is on their hearts. And we want to ask that of our guests and see what, wisdom they might have for us, or even if they're still trying to figure it out, where are they going for their own education? What are they reading to try to get better? What are they watching? What are they doing in their daily lives? Because they've, the two of them have worked in this industry for quite some time, and I'm sure have seen a lot of awesome things, and also have had a lot of difficult moments, and they're going to make us better by sharing that. And that's what we hope to do with this first one.
And I think the conversations and even the panel on Monday are going to work better if it's everybody kind of coming to see this. It's not going to be as effective if it's just a virtual room full of puppeteers of color just listening to Puppeteers of Color. It works way better when there's the entire community coming around to try to open up dialogue. And hopefully this is the first of a domino that can start conversations that aren't necessarily over Zoom or whatever, that are happening in water coolers or wherever people meet. Water coolers.
Yeah, the water cooler at my new job at Initech. That's where I have all my
the water cooler in my kitchen where I chat with the dogs. Do you guys have plans on how frequently these are going to be happening? Like, do you have some other ones planned for down the road?
Not as of yet.
Okay.
This first one, it just felt really important to start the conversation. We didn't want to wait. It all felt, to all of us, it felt really important that we have this first one as soon as we can. And this isn't a platform for any of us to further our career. And so we're not thinking of it as like, this is Puppeteers of Conversation, the next one's going to be every Tuesday at 7,
Sure.
It's not that sort of thing. And so we want to take our time, and we don't want to rush anything as well. And so, we don't have a plan for the next one, but this first one was really important to get going.
And we do have a lot of puppeteers that we have reached out to that we would love to talk to. We just don't have a schedule set yet.
Sure. No, that's great. We have a question from someone, David, I think you might know. In your experiences, Cassan, in your experiences, what is an example when you've experienced an inclusive environment where you thrived creatively as a person of color? Any specific things that you recall that intentionally created that?
I can't think of anything straight off the bat, but yes, there have been moments when I've like, this is amazing. I think part of that is there is a certain amount of I guess not respect. It's more than respect. It's a value. That's what it is. It's a there's a value in who you are coming into the set and or coming onto the stage and working with them. They see your value and what you bring culturally. And also, honestly, when I get to a place and I see more diverse faces, I really those are places where those environments are opening up and they seem like there's stuff bouncing around.
Even though this isn't puppetry, the writer's room that I'm in right now, I really feel supported because there is just factually a great deal of diversity, but there's also a lot of discussion about it. And we're always constantly examining our work, just very intentionally saying, you know, is this an authentic representation? Like, is everybody included in this scene? How are we showing people? What are the decisions we're making? We're even questioning, like, what do we think our blind spots are? And how do we address it? And I also kind of like that we're talking about how we talk about things and just making sure that everybody does feel comfortable having these conversations and feels heard. And I think that kind of meta level conversation is really important also when you're trying to grow a diverse workplace.
Yeah. So currently I'm working on a show for Sci-Fi, and this has been one of the most, besides being with Sesame, like I have to say that, like, this has been one of the most amazing productions I've ever been on, and that is because of just how it's not that they're like actively trying to make a diverse space. It just exists, and it's just like, it's not even a question. It's just almost like it's always existed that way. And like the entire production is women, and that's amazing. I've never been on a production where everyone I work with is a woman. And also, you know, the producer who oversees me on this production has been connecting me with other people in her department that are Latin Americans. And like, I'm making all these friends in my Latin American community through this project. And honestly, that's never happened before. And it's just really exciting. And there are moments where, you know, we don't have moments where it's like, oh, you know, this character would never make that choice or whatever, but it's more just like when I am talking about something that I feel strongly about, I'm heard. And even as just a puppeteer in general, like, it's sometimes hard for your voice to be heard, and for them to hear me and really value me just because is incredible. I'm not saying all productions are terrible and bad, but it's such a warm and happy place, and it's a reflection of how our entire industry should be. You know, we should, as women, as people of color, as whatever our background comes from, we should feel comfortable in the room. We shouldn't feel uneasy. And that's what this production has done for me. I feel completely lifted up and supported, and it's incredible.
That's wonderful. Great. Thank you all for sharing that. I have a question, and I apologize in advance because I know I'm going to stumble through it a little bit, but just basing you know, this off of the experience that Adam and I have had as you know, two of only 3 or 4 puppeteers in Buffalo. The other couple guys that we work with are white guys by virtue of their interest in puppetry. And you know, when we then wrangle in our camera person and a few other production folks, just by nature of the people who are interested in creating you know, film and television, if you're in a small area that doesn't have the diversity of a New York or an LA or an Atlanta, do you guys have any suggestions on how to create work that is you know, still representative and still inviting those open voices and that comfort and all those things, even when you may be limited by who is around you? And I don't know if there's even like a great answer to that, but I think it's something that we always kind of mention when we're doing things and taking production photos, because it's just like, oh, yep, it's the same, it's the same group of people, and we would love to have, you know, for a whole number of reasons, you know, a more diverse group of people and artists. But sometimes you're just, like I said, limited to who's interested, who grew up aspiring to that.
Yeah,
right.
I would say don't prevent yourself from, you know, creating, of course. If you don't have, you know, if you don't have access to something, you shouldn't let it prevent you, no matter what that is. But I also think that if you're looking to tell, you're like, you watched another show, or you watched another live show, or you watched a documentary, and something about that culture inspired you and touched you, and you're like, I really want to like be somebody who helps lift up this story that I'm feeling connected to. You know, the internet is a vast place, and Facebook has a group for just about every single group. There's even a Puppeteers of Color Facebook group. And if you're looking for someone that's connected to that culture, you know, be mindful first that you shouldn't tell that story without someone from that culture. And you just can't do it justice, right? So reach out, you know, go online and just type in, like, go on Facebook and type in, you know, like that, you know, whatever cultural history you're looking for, and reach out to those people that are part of that and say, like, hey, I really want to help lift up your voices. How can I do that? And I think that'd be a great first step into finding people of color that you can incorporate into, you know, your community, if you don't, you know, have anyone in your community like that. But yeah, that's a first step that I think would be lovely to try.
And also, when you're assembling your team, if you can't find a POC puppeteer, you know, what about the rest of your crew? Like, is there somebody who is interested in lighting or camera op? Because that will also, I mean, first of all, that's just more voices on set. Right. And also it will help expand your network. Like, then maybe they'll see it and they're like, oh, I've got a friend who isn't a puppeteer, but is a dancer who might be interested. And I think, you know, we've all started out in that place. Like, sure. We all had our first job where we're exposed to this weird world of puppetry, and you think maybe it's a thing. So just kind of reaching beyond like the obvious, oh, these are people I know. And it is always tough, because basically anytime you do a show, you really do need to rely on your friends, because you're asking them to do a lot of work for pizza. No pay. Yeah. So to reach out to a stranger and be like, hey, you are a person of color. Do you like pizza? Do you want to be in my show? Yeah, that's awkward and horrible. But are there other creative ways that you can grow your network when you're creating?
Yeah, it's a tough tightrope to walk between trying to diversify the people you work with and trying to avoid just like straight up tokenism, for just having minorities, just to have them in there, which that's all perception. It's crazy. It's definitely a challenge, and it's worth a challenge. Some things should be difficult and not too easy. If it was very easy, then it probably would already be done. But it's worth the effort to kind of reach out and to try to pull people in, and to know that, like, in some cultures, puppetry hasn't taken off, especially the American style. In some cultures, I don't even, in most of the inner city schools I went to, we didn't have drama department, and I didn't get that until later in life in high school. When we started working drama, or when my mom would take me out and put me specifically in a drama. And so if you don't have access to the arts at younger ages, and this is a totally different conversation. Like, my God, what a spool of yarn I pulled just now. No, but it's just like those things are. It's man, there's so much to do. We got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's the intent of being okay with knowing that there's a lot of work. What can I do? What's one thing that I can do to take one step towards this enormous ball of yarn?
Yeah. One thing I would even recommend for people to do too, and one thing that, I know it's harder now in a time of pandemic, and just that those kind of ideas lingering in the air. But even holding, like, in the same way that Sesame Workshop has had these workshops where they bring people in for training and stuff. Like if we had us and maybe even other communities who are trying to do something similar, have like a free learn puppetry opportunities, and from there, you know, opening that up to your whole local community, getting people in, seeing how they work, and hopefully you'll be able to attract a different other demographics of people that might not have discovered it. Because that's one thing I've been trying to do, like with my YouTube channel, is trying to make puppetry as accessible as possible to people. It's because I didn't know I loved puppetry until I knew about puppetry. You know, I mean, it's really about just awareness of the art form in general.
Yeah. Puppet Showplace Theater out in Massachusetts has a it was a in-person thing where they would do like a monitor night, as we know it here in NYC, in New York City, where Puppet Kitchen would have monitor nights. But what they were doing out in Massachusetts was it was the same thing with their community. But now, since we're in this quarantine time, they've been doing it via Zoom. And where I think that is really cool is that, you know, you're immediately in front of a monitor and a camera the whole time. And so you have no choice but to be doing the thing that you're going to be doing later in the industry. Now, it might be different because of the, you know, reverse and scan and all that. But
Zoom, you can flip.
You can. Oh, that's right. You can flip.
Yes,
it.
you can.
You can practice the other way. But that opens it up to the rest of the world, like you're saying, Adam. Like it makes it more accessible to everybody outside of where they're doing it. And it's, yeah, man, accessibility and education. That's what it's all about.
And a quick plug, Jim Jam virtual session 2 is actually happening tonight. And there may be a chance to still sign up for that. That's it. I think it's 7 to 8:30 tonight.
Yeah, and I was in the first one that they did, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking that out for people. Again, to Chris's point before about saying, like, you don't want to just, you know, invite people of color, you know, for the sake of it or for tokenism and stuff. And there was to cite television again, there was a great moment on Community in one of the early seasons where they were deciding what the school's mascot was going to be. They wanted it to be a human being, and they had a whole swatch of like the whole spectrum of melanin, essentially. And someone walks into the dean's office where they're deciding this, and they say, you know, I think not being racist is the new racism. And it got into this, you know, it was this weird kind of surreal point, but it really is, you know, making sure that for as much as you want to be inclusive and stuff, that you're not overextending yourself to a part where you're just doing, you know, the opposite of what your intention is.
Trying to cover bases. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, there's like a lot of truth in that joke, right? Like, not saying that anti-racism is the new racism, but that a lot of times people will react emotionally to a situation and be like, well, you can't feel that way because I'm not racist. I'm not a racist person. And so, you know, I just wanted to say that because it makes me laugh, but I definitely have experienced moments where, you know, you tell someone like, that's kind of questionable what you're saying and doing. It's like, well, I'm not racist. Like that's impossible. I'm not racist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Another suggestion I have as to how you can not just include people on a token level, offer to be in their stuff also. Like, there are people of color are already creating work. They exist. And even if it's not necessarily puppetry, like, I'm sure there are a ton of filmmakers nearby. And if you approach them and say, hey, here's my cool skill set, what can I do to help your voice be heard on your project? And now you've got this great relationship, then you can bring them on to your project in ways that are based on actual friendships and work history.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I love it. Liz, you're the best.
It's so true.
Adam, can you bring up this this question from Kanja?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Just came in.
Kanja!
So this is for you, Chris. You said that that the more you puppeteered, the better you became, especially when surrounded by experienced puppeteers who are committed to help and mentor. How do we address the cycle of perhaps puppeteers of color not being hired for shows as frequently as a result of not getting those same development or perhaps non-POCs outside of workshops? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's the same. I think about this all the time. I think about this all the time in the shower. Like I said, it's the lack of work. There needs to be more and new stuff happening. And people always think about when they think about puppetry, they always think about Muppets, Sesame Street. There is so much puppetry going on, right? The creature effects all over in Europe. They're doing so much stuff on film, and I don't even know what under those puppets look like. It's just getting more work and getting those puppeteers in this position, and I have no clue how it happens, because there's a thing that people start to think, like I said earlier, you think there's some kind of disconnect between the art form of puppetry and the Black community or whichever community, and that may not necessarily be the case. It may be that we're not even auditioning for those roles. Maybe the agents, or however that works, maybe if there are agents pulling in for stuff, they don't even know to look for us. Or maybe if it's not agents, if it's just kind of cronyism, like I'm fine, not cronyism in a bad way, but like if it's just the buddy system where I got my friend here, and we're not into those networks, and it's a tough thing to juggle, because I find myself exceedingly blessed that I'm working with Sesame and the other things I have done on camera. But like even then, I'm like, I'll see something on TV, I'm like, man, that's cool. I'd love to be even to know that the audition exists for something like that, or oh man, that's cool. I wonder, do I have any, and when I can see those projects being formed and whatnot, even if I'm not including everything, because obviously it's tough. You don't want to, I want to push for more diversity, but I'm not trying to just be like, hire me. But also hire him. I would also love to be hired, but I would also love to see crazy different faces, because there are fantastic puppeteers out there, and not a lot of work.
Yeah, something Adam always says is the more you work, the more you work. And to Liz's point before, when people think of like who are the ringers in puppetry, it's understandable that like names like any of yours wouldn't come up just by nature of, Peter Linz or Matt Vogel or any of those guys being more identifiable as your go-to choices. So yeah, I think just the more people are able to, high tides lifts all boats, and the more we can make work for each other. Yeah.
I want to add on that too, and just thinking to kind of harkening back to what we were talking about before, is I think the best thing that we can really do is promote more people to create new diverse work, because I said it's harder to change things that are even though that's happening and the changes are being made, it's easier to start new things with that diversity, and hopefully these bigger new things that are created are going to be the new big things in the future. And and then it gives something for people to support and look forward to working on and being a part of and sharing. So I would just say, to most people, everyone, create new work, make it as diverse as possible as you can on many different avenues of production to writing to all different parts of it, and then flood the internet with it, and let people love it.
100%. One of my mentors in puppetry, which I was so fortunate to be connected with, I had asked him like, okay, I really want to like be doing puppetry on TV. Like, how do I get there? And he very simply just said, well, put it out there. That's it. Just put it out there. And, him saying it to me in that moment made me realize, what you're saying, Adam, is that I need to take all of these skills that I have and just start producing my own work. Like, that is immediately going to give me a place to work on my craft and get better. And when I'm releasing it into the world, that is very loudly going to tell other people in my industry that I'm capable of doing these things. And over the past 6 years, that's what I've been doing. And that's really what's helped me. And I've seen other puppeteers do that as well. And it's really helped move them forward. And so if you're creating something, or you have an idea for something that you want to create, don't let anything hold you back. You know, if you've got an iPad, you've got a camera, and you have an editing suite right there immediately. Shoot it, put it out there, and it'll just make you better. Even if you think your puppetry is not great, that's okay. Like, my puppetry is still terrible. Everyone's puppetry is terrible. Like, we all scrutinize it, but you have to put it out there. No one's going to see it. And that's really what has to happen, is people have to see it.
And that's so important too, because we live in a world where, I mean, auditions are happening less and less. People mostly look at the work you've done and kind of decide whether or not they want to hire you for, on whatever level. Again, even from a production standpoint, they look at your most recent work. And if the most recent thing that you worked on was a video of 10 years ago, you know, it's going to not be looked at the same. So, you know, it's really about, I think it's a lot of it's about quantity too, and just making sure you're sharpening that tool and just creating new stuff and putting it out as frequently as you can, and don't be overly precious. I think that's one thing that keeps people holding back from producing too much stuff. Is they're like, oh, well, it's not perfect. Oh, it's not perfect. You know what? It's like, you just gotta be pumping stuff out, and that's kind of like what Cam said before. More work equals more work. Produce more.
Right.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
when we see more work from a more diverse group of artists, then that's going to grow the audience too. And then again, all ships rise with the tide. Like, there will be more projects because there will be more of a desire for this wonderful art form.
And it's also a place to, when we do have puppeteers of color who are starting to get into higher positions and work ourselves up, it's time to start building ladders and to help raise some of that stuff up too. So if I can be in a position where I can use whatever clout I have, whatever that dream is, to raise up people who are up and coming and create more diverse stuff, that works too. Because I mean, there's it is nice to have a kind of a bootstraps mentality, but also there has to be something up there helping to build that bridge.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that everyone else feels the same way as I do, where it's, you know, if there's anyone out there that's watching this now and has been trying to figure something out or curious about something, like, message me. I get messages from young people on Instagram specifically, not all the time, but every now and again, asking me like, hey, how do you do this? Like, I saw you made this video where this happened. How did you do that? And I will share everything I know, because everything I know is not new. It's been around for a long time, and it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everybody. Yeah. So please reach out, and I will share all my knowledge.
Well, and David, I know you to also, you know, share wonderful work when it's sent to you as well. And you might not be the highest ladder, but even if any of us could be, you know, a small step stool to bring up someone who is just starting out, to bring them up to, you know, just a little bit higher is how we get that momentum going.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because a lot of people are focused too on like how many views or how many likes something gets, when really it doesn't. I mean, those numbers don't matter as much as who those views and likes are attached to. Because guess what? If you only have 5 views, but like one of those people are a hiring person for a big production company, that's the view that matters, you know? So people get too caught up in the numbers rather than remembering that there's people attached to those.
Yeah, the algorithms are all working against us. So just remember that the numbers do not matter.
For sure. Yeah.
Another plug, we have Sarah Nolan on the chat. And there's another, yep, there we go. At the Puppet Showplace Theater, there's the Black Puppeteer Empowerment Grant, and the deadline to apply for that is today. So make sure you go to that link that she shared, and
there's a clickable version.
Yes,
they can't click the one on the screen. But if you go into the actual comments, it's a clickable link. So make sure you check that out.
That's great. Yeah. Stuff like that is definitely fantastic to start to move the ball. And I know that Grant it accounts for like writing and exploring and researching and really being able to jump into it. So this is an awesome opportunity to at least get a good little jump start on creating stuff.
Yeah, excellent.
Definitely.
Excellent. Yeah, so you know, do you guys have any, as we kind of begin to wrap up, any final thoughts you want to share, or anything that we missed that you were hoping that you'd be able to talk about while we're still live?
The thing that I'm most excited about in terms of our project and also interviews like this is that I'm thrilled that we're all getting we're all practicing learning how to talk about these issues. I know that everybody's really worried about saying the wrong thing. And I think that fear is really working against us, and people are more likely to not discuss things and not make the effort for fear of a misstep. And I am really excited that we're going to probably make a bunch of missteps, but we're all going to be learning together. And I'm just thrilled that people are willing to try right now. This is a great moment in history, and we're all in it.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to add to that, because I think that is a fear that a lot of people do have about accidentally making a misstep. And you know what? I think, if someone does, that's what maybe makes people afraid to talk about, because they're afraid of the misstep and afraid of especially the backlash they can get from a misstep. So, one thing is, I shared a couple of weeks ago something that Obama said about, really trying to, because a lot of people are trying to call people out, and I think there's a good way to do that and a bad way to do that, is making sure that you're doing it in a way with an intense intention to pursue a conversation rather than accusation. Making sure it's positive change that we're making rather than just trying to make ourselves feel virtuous by calling something out. Making sure we're actually trying to, have a positive effect on the world.
Yeah.
I think that will make people more comfortable with being able to have these kinds of conversations.
Exactly.
And I think also, I realize we're doing this online by virtue of geography and current health situations. But I think this is something Adam and I talk about on the phone all the time, is the more you can have these conversations, voice to voice or face to face or however you do it, because it's so easy to lose intentionality and tone and all those things in Facebook comments as well.
Yeah. And also too, I think, again, these conversations are important to have with everyone, but I think it's an easiest place to start having these conversations with people that you love, because they won't automatically necessarily be on the same kind of defense or feel like it's an accusation. And if we all just did it with people that we loved, it would kind of eventually hit everybody, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if there's something like, if you're having some thoughts and they're making you feel fearful or uncomfortable, you don't have to jump on Facebook and find the first person of color and ask them that question. You can do a quick Google search and probably find an article or a book that talks about that thing that you're trying to understand. And so you can
absolutely
take some time and educate yourself, and then go have that conversation, because you'll have the right knowledge and the right language to have that conversation.
Yeah, and I another thing, this is what I wanted to say before when I had my little brain fart, but I think we have the benefit of being in the puppetry community because 99% of the people in there are game to adapt, and to everyone is coming into it with that bright spirit and wanting to make the world a better place, and our community is relatively small. And I think Chris, you mentioned before, if it was easy, it would already be done, and that's absolutely true. But I think we have the benefit of being a small cohort of people who can be that igniting factor, and sort of drive that change.
This is my I'm not gonna name drop all day. I was talking to Stephanie D'Abruzzo. This is name drop, who I love so much. And she said a very something that I've thought about it's come up at least once a week, and she was saying the job of puppeteers, especially on television, is all problem solving. Every part of it is problem solving. It's problem solving the shot and this, and then the character and the context. And the more I've thought about what she said, I'm like, oh, everything, all the parts of this are problem solving. And I think this is a great community to have these kind of conversations with and to tackle this problem, because naturally problem solving, the things that we as a community have done on film and in theater are ridiculous. I don't even know how we thought of some of the stuff, but we figure it out. Like make them ride a bike, make them swim, you know, like we figure it out. So
you can drive a car, yeah,
or a speedboat. Like we have the ability and the personnel in order to tackle anything that's put in front of us, and I think this is no different. We can get this done too.
Absolutely, gotta lean into the fear.
Yeah,
absolutely. And yeah, it's wonderful when we could do it with, as Adam said, people that we love. And you know, one more time, we'll mention that the first Puppeteers of Color conversation is this Monday, July 29th at 3 p.m. That's Eastern time, with Noel McNeil and Pam Arciero. Liz, you're running that panel, correct?
Moderating, yep.
Or moderating, yes. Wonderful.
Yeah, and if people want to get a link to that, that will be on David's personal page, where they can get a clickable link. No, because really, I want people to be able to get a clickable link for them to be able to find this. So, look at that.
Yeah, I'll have that on my page. It'll be on my Instagram. You know,
there it is.
Link in bio and all that kind of stuff.
And we'll be sharing that as well from Puppeteers. So
yes,
you have no excuse to not be there, so except maybe work. But but guys, thank you so much, David Bizzaro, Chris Hayes, and Liz Hara. It was wonderful to talk to you, and hopefully this is not the end of any of our conversations together.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. This is so much fun.
Yes, love it. Love you guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Love you too, man.